This time you've got some opposition this year. First
Yes.
time around you did. Second time around you were able to get back up there with no opposition. So what do you feel like you have left to get accomplished that you weren't able to accomplish in the past 3 years you've been up there?
Yeah, so there's so much work to do. The very first thing I want to do is really continue to expand. Remember when I first got up there, I started the Community Enhancement Authority, whose sole responsibility was to shrink the footprint of poverty, is to really build the infrastructure there. And to really take, not just talk about poverty, but really start to talk about job creation. How do we use that authority to leverage the resources at the federal government, the state level, and the municipal level to actually really bring real infrastructure to economic development? We're about to do something very huge as it relates to the small business department that we created, and I'm not going to tell you yet, but in the next 10 days.
You're gonna leave us hanging.
Yes,
like that?
yes, you got to come back. You got to come
Okay,
back.
the next 10 days we'll have to tune in.
Yes.
Now, just going back to that Poverty Authority for a second, kind of where are we with that, and why has it taken 3 years to kind of get it up and running?
Yeah, so I mean, you really have to build an infrastructure. I mean, you have bylaws, you have legal, you have a lot of things that you have to do to make sure that as you start to acquire property and you start to actually move stuff around, that you have the right infrastructure in place, building the board out, those kind of things. And you don't necessarily want to do that with money. You don't need that. What you're really trying to do is figure out who are the real stakeholders in the community, getting people involved in the idea, and really just challenging the suppositions. What is poverty? Because again, there's probably 15, 20 different categories of poverty or more. It's something different when someone is a single dad with 2 kids, or a mom and a father living together with no kids. They still may have the same plight, call them poverty, but they have different needs. And so to think through that stuff and to strategically work through that, we have to make sure we have that in place before we start really actually trying to raise money and do the things we need to do to actually address the issue.
Ultimately, addressing the issue of poverty with this authority, what's the goal of this authority? What is it going to do?
It will absolutely shrink Category 4 poverty. And so when you think about Category 4 poverty, you're talking about people who 40% of a community, a census block, makes under $22,000 a year. How do you do that? Well, what you have to do is you have to have an economic hub within those communities and where people can actually access. So, for instance, here's a great example. Around Mercer University, there is recreational facility where people actually come into that facility to get services. Well, you can do those in a bunch of different communities. But what did that recreational facility do? It actually hires people from that community, and so you have 10, 12 people who may not have worked now in that community working. But those kind of ideas are actually embedding economic development opportunities into communities, actually give them a place to go and to actually serve, to give them living wages and so forth. So
okay.
we'll do that.
All right. Well, talking about poverty and areas of need, one of those areas was that Jeffersonville Road. It's been a lot of people call it an eyesore. They say it's damaging to their cars. A couple of weeks ago, you and Mayor Ricker promised a short-term fix for paving that area. Now
we did it.
You did it. And now your opponent is saying, though, that he and Senator Lucas and Chairman Sam Hart were the people who came up with the long-term solution, getting all the state dollars in place. Did you have any part in that?
No, I mean, you're talking about long-term solution. It's 20 years. And that's part of the problem, right? We've done this. Well, when you ride down that road up until Saturday, it was still bumpy. And so the long-term strategy, we're not talking about a long-term strategy. We have to start being smart in our community about what we need today. You got to fix it, and you have to do it. Now, that short-term solution is a huge solution because it was supposed to be done, what, 10, 15 years ago. Now we're 20 years into it, and we're still promising people in that neighborhood something's going to happen. Something's going to happen. We did this. We did. He's not even in office, right? You didn't do anything. And the truth of the matter is that we actually paved that road. It's something I ran on. I don't know if you remember this, but I did a press conference when I first ran on that road at that corner and said, we're going to get this fixed. And we did it. 2.5 years. But what's amazing, Ashley, is this. Is on Saturday when I was there, I actually got a chance to ride the truck and actually go across and pave the road. But it took them less than 8 hours. Less than 8 hours to pave an intersection that people have been worried about and wondering about for years. Now that's a mess. And if you think it just took less than 8 hours, it's about priorities. You know they have 31 different projects, county projects, as it relates to road improvement. 31. The reason why that got pushed to the front is because I stayed on it and I was tenacious about getting it done. And we leveraged the seat to actually bring attention to that, and it happened. But there's so much more work to do. So much more work to do, and the rest of the road needs to be done and so forth. But it's one of those symbols. It's symbolic of the changing of a guard, saying, look, here's a young guy who stayed on the project. He got it done. And yeah, it's not what we want. We want the whole road finished. Yes, the long-term strategy should happen. But the reality is we made a real strong move. we did what we said we're going to do, and we're going to do more if I get reelected.
And aside from that, what are some other areas of need in your district that you feel have been neglected?
Oh my gosh. So when you talk about not just East Macon, I mean, East Macon is obviously, it gets a lot of attention, and East Macon, Pleasant Hill needs attention. But you're also talking about places, I mean, Fort Hill needs a lot of attention. You're talking about Pleasant Hill, you're talking about Houston Avenue. There are places down on Ponce de Leon Avenue that look like Beirut. There are places in Pleasant Hill that, quite frankly, they call the bucket of blood because there's so much crime and stuff that goes on down there. But if you go down there, and they know me because I'm down there like, hey man, I'm here to help. And it's not just the government's here to help. It's a guy who says, I understand the needs. I understand that you got blight over here. I understand that the houses are overgrown, that you have all of this dilapidation, that wild animals are over there. We need to address that. And we need to address it in a very real way. And I think that moving forward over the next, couple years, 5 years, then I think of James Beverly being in a political space to leverage the goodwill of people in this community will go a long way into the future helping the folk.
Why do you think it's taken so long, though, for those areas to get attention? I mean, it's not like it happened overnight. So how do you realistically talk to people and say, yeah, I'm going to get this done? I mean, you saw how long it took to get one area of a street paved, 2.5 years.
Right.
So how do you come up with solutions for these people who are in need?
Yeah, I think it's leadership. I think it's establishing what the highest and best use of the resources in the community are. And who does that? And that's at the top. It is not at the, I mean, the people have to push their agenda, but at the top, it's a leadership issue. It's how do we set priorities for the community so that the whole community is enhanced by by one another and not just one sector always getting the cream of the crop. And I think the leadership is the way to go. Listen. The consolidated government has an opportunity like never before to actually bring a community together in a way in which we not just bring it together, oh, blacks and whites get along, but what is the economic opportunity that's created by this? How do we do procurement now? How do we make sure that like home rule really works? If you're a citizen of Bibb County, you should benefit from it. And we should talk about that.
Now, you know how difficult it is just from being up there, and you've seen bills fail and pass at the last minute. So in terms of reality, break it down for people. You want to fix this blight, you want to fix this poverty in the neighborhoods. Could you get it done next session?
Yeah. So a couple things. I just did it, right? So think about this. I was elected 2.5 years ago. I got 2 bills passed, local bills to deal with this issue. That's sort of unprecedented. I was a freshman. The first 3 weeks that I was up there, I got a bill passed. And it's because working with people, really helping them to understand what the issue is. A lot of times people don't really know what goes on in these communities, but showing them, they're like, hey man, I don't know what to do, but if you got a plan, then let's take a look at it. And that's what happened. And then as I added to it, they see fit to, hey, James, we trust you. Let's keep it moving. And so I think, yes, I can do a lot of stuff. Going back up there, there's going to be an expansion of really not just talking about poverty, but really prosperity. Because we have 2 very important things that are going on right now. Dredging of the Savannah and Atlanta Hartsfield dumping $1 billion into it. Macon, Georgia, Central Georgia, is right smack dead in the heart of all the economic drivers that are happening in the state of Georgia. It's a very exciting time indeed. You got I-16, I-75, these 2 major arteries that can pump out all kinds of economic development opportunities, not just blue-collar work, but white-collar work. What if we do biomedical? You got Mercer University, you got all this university system. I mean, it's exciting, but you want to be at the Capitol at this particular point to start thinking about what does it look like if we put a freeway around Macon? What if we start talking about an exchange where we bypass Atlanta so we can take our freight away from Atlanta, not clog up the infrastructure there, but take it to Augusta, take it to South Carolina, take it to Alabama. And Macon is the hub that can make that happen. So that's what you'll hear me talking about over the next 5, 10 years. It'll be economic development on a macro scale that will drive the community in a very, very positive way into some real solutions.
Now, many will argue jobs and education go hand in hand. We know that Bibb County is falling short of expectations nationwide, let alone Georgia's. How do we fix the issues in education that we have here on the local level? Are they going to happen with doing away with the Common Core, or do you feel it's more of a community need type system? Yeah,
I think I think that a community-based education is extremely important because each community is different. But I think we have to think strategically. If we keep our kids on an agrarian schedule, right, the schedule may not work anymore. If we're talking about really creating opportunities for 100 years from now, then what does the education look that way? Not trying to retrofit what education is, or not coming up with the next scheme, right? Race to the top, Common Core. I mean, there's issues about both of those. But what if we start thinking, how do we want to position ourselves in Central Georgia to move forward. What does an economic development hub look like if you're really talking about bioengineering or biomedicine? If you're talking about telemedicine opportunities, how do you educate your kids for those opportunities to go to engineering school, to do the STEM curriculum? That's what we need to be talking about. And then the kids who say, you know what, I don't really want to deal with STEM. I want to actually deal with manufacturing. Well, we have all this land down on Houston Avenue. You have manufacturing opportunities. I think the place is bright, but we have to think about what is our position. You take a look at the Triangle in North Carolina. You take Silicon Valley. It's because leaders got together and said, what can we do to actually aggregate our brain trust around an issue? And then you create all these peripheral opportunities. We have logistics, but we also have a transportation system that is second to none because of the way that the highway is juxtaposed to one another. That is the stuff that we really need to think about as a region, and I think this thing will change.
So thinking regionally when it comes to education and not just Bibb County or
Right.
just Houston County.
You can't, because I mean, listen, you know this like I do, Ashley, is that most people in America will travel about 20, 25 minutes before they're like, I'm not sure if the job is worth it, unless it's a great job, right? But most, and that's been that way for the inception of this country. So if you go 20, 25 miles outside of Macon, then what do the opportunities look like? And I think that we have to think about our kids traveling, 20, 25 miles out, 20, 25 minutes out, and then is it manufacturing? Is it this high-tech manufacturing? I think there's a lot of opportunities there, but we got to educate our kids for that. Look, the Quick Start program at Central Georgia Tech can train your whole entire operation 6 months. So we have that here. That's right here in our community. There's no reason why we can't take advantage of that. But we got to make sure that we tie it into a real big deal. And we can come up with big ideas and big solutions to give people an opportunity to reach with their education into those opportunities.